Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Barbuda, which is part of Antigua and Barbuda. Really quick, I'm going to get this out the way before I forget, because if you want to know more about the details of the history of Antigua and Barbuda, I'm going to link my video up there that I did about the entire country. I'm just going to highlight Barbuda today, which has a very different history from Antigua. So if you want to learn even more about it, you can click that after this video. Antigua, as you can see, is down here. So Antigua and Barbuda, and there's a tiny little rock way out here somewhere that is also part of Antigua and Barbuda. I think it's over here. Is that it? I think that's it. Yes, that's it. Redonda Island. But we're only talking about beautiful Barbuda. So Antigua and Barbuda itself is part of the Lesser Antilles. I believe it's part of the Windward Islands of the Caribbean. So here you can see the entire Caribbean. You've got the Greater Antilles, the big islands over here, and the Lesser Antilles are the little islands over here. And you can see that we are nearby only one independent country, St. Kitts and Nevis, over here. The rest are owned by other countries. There's Anguilla, which is owned by the UK. And we have Montserrat and Guadeloupe, which are owned by France. Antigua and Barbuda is right there. So you can see that this side is the Atlantic Ocean. This side is the Caribbean. Barbuda has a lot of differences from the main island, Antigua. Antigua is a volcanic island. Barbuda is a coralline island, which means that it's entirely made up of coral, or technically coral limestone it's made out of. So very different soil compositions between the two islands. Also, coral islands usually mean that you can't build big docks and harbors around because there's so much coral underneath this water that you can't get big ships through. So Barbuda does not have any major ports. There's definitely a ferry that goes between the islands, but nothing, no cruise ships or anything like that. And Barbuda is very sparsely populated. There is only one town, and it is the town of Codrington. You can see here, this is where, if you live in Barbuda, this is where you live, in Codrington. The rest of the island is quite sparse, as you can see. Unlike other Caribbean islands, this isn't like a jungle, thickly forested island because it is a coral island, and thick jungles don't really grow on coral islands. But you do get some beautiful greenery, and there's some interesting wildlife here on Barbuda. I'll show you now. Up here, this whole part of the island, which you can see is still quite lagoony. This is one of the aspects of coralline islands, coral atolls, which we've talked about a lot over in the Pacific Ocean. Eventually they're round. Yeah, eventually the coral between them builds up and you get an island like this. So once upon a time this was a coral atoll, and you can still see the central lagoon in the middle here. This used to have been the entire island, but the coral has piled up and created this island. But anyway, this whole part, which is still quite lagoony, is a bird reserve for the frigate birds. And frigate birds are just very silly looking. I really like them. This characteristic big red pouch, and they're very black and dark. Except for the babies, they're tiny and white and cute. See, cute. A very famous ocean-going bird. I'm going to put on the everything filter because I know there's more slideshows here. I bet this reserve, there's a beach there. We're going to look at the beaches next. And where'd they go? Where did they go? I don't know. But anyway, you figure out what frigate birds look like. don't need that now. Let's talk about the beaches because that is the biggest aspect of this beach. This is why people come to visit this island. And there are two large beaches you can see. This is the more famous one, the Pink Sand Beach, thusly named because the sand is actually pink. Now, how does that happen? How does it become pink? Let's find a picture that will show us. Isn't this gorgeous, by the way? You know that this water is like bath water. It's so warm and luxurious. So as you can see, the sand here is not necessarily sand. It is thousands and thousands of tiny seashells all broken up and creating the very interesting pink sand. Now there's another picture of someone showing you the shells. I'm trying to find it. And look at that. See, it's sand, right? It's all seashells. Eventually be all ground up. But it is all made up of beautiful little shells. So they're having their meal here. That looks tasty. Not a lot of tourists come here to Barbuda, yet at least, because well, that's pretty under the water. Because like I said, no big ships dock here, so cruise ships don't come here. And there's not much for tourists to really do yet. We'll get to that. But things are happening. We're going to talk about it in history. Next, we're going to look at Princess Diana Beach, which is considered the most beautiful beach in Barbuda, maybe even the Caribbean, and maybe even the world. Look how isolated it is. It is named after Princess Diana, the one and only, because she used to visit here in the summers, and this was her favorite spot. All isolated and alone, just her and the waves, which is wonderful. Princess Diana was one of my childhood heroes. We're going to talk about this in a minute in its history. She was one of my big heroes as a child. I used to collect photographs of her, cut them out, and I pasted them on a big collage. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. The Atlantic side, of course, is much more choppy. The water's colder. Not much happening over here. There is a little beach right here. Let's check it out. Fishing Creek Bay Beach. But yeah, not the luxurious. Look at all the conch shells there. Oh, we found a big conch shell. Incredible. Not necessarily the luxurious beaches that you would find on the other side, but very nice nonetheless. You can see all the coral under there. This is why ships can't come in, right? Too much coral. She found some big old conch shells. Quite important to its history. Let's seg into history here because this island has been inhabited for quite a while. In its early history, it was inhabited by many different indigenous tribes. There were the Arawak, which actually I'll show you a place. Down here, at this cave, after a hurricane, not the big hurricane that came through in 2017, but I think one right after that, I think in 2019, a hurricane uncovered this incredible cave and they found skeletons inside from the Arawak people and could date them. So this is where people used to live, in these little caves. It's giving Island of the Blue Dolphins vibes, isn't it? But the Arawak lived here, the Siboney lived here and farmed here also. I saw a source that said the Taino also lived and farmed here, but I only saw one source that said that, so I don't know how much stock I take in that. But the predominant tribe that controlled this island for a long time were the Kalinago, otherwise known as the Carib. The Carib were very fierce fighters. I forgot to mention the conches. Hold on. Apparently, I think it was the Siboney harvested conch shells for their meat, and that's what they mainly lived off of. That's what made me think of it. That was the Siboney, I believe. The Arawak, I think they also ate conch shells because shells are delicious. But the Carib peoples in particular were incredibly, I would say violent, might be the wrong word, I'll say territorial once they conquered a place, they were not going to let it go. As was the case when the British decided to claim this island in 1628. The British already had St. Kitts and Nevis over here, so they said, we'll just snatch up these islands too. And when attempts were made to colonize the island, the Caribs fought them off viciously, and the British were like, well, we'll claim it, but there's not much we can do here. We can't settle here because the people are too violent. They don't want to leave. However, leave they would eventually, and we're not quite sure how the entire population fled. But we do know that many of them passed away from being exposed to smallpox from Europeans. And it's believed that many people, the survivors of that epidemic, fled. But we don't really have any evidence of that because many decades later, when the British came poking around here again, the island was empty. So one way or another, the people left this island. Very tragic, isn't it? They call this island Waomoni, which means Island of Herons. So there's always lots of wildlife on this island. But the British were about to introduce some more. And one family in particular would introduce that wildlife, the Codrington family. And yes, you've heard that word before because the main town is Codrington. This island was leased to the Codrington family in 1685. They had already made quite a fortune in a few, I think, on St. Kitts and Antigua also. They were establishing sugar plantations there. And they just snatched up this island because why not? And apparently the British government was very willing to give it to them because they leased this island for 1 fat sheep per year, if necessary, was the official wording. So they took over the island and started to build up a settlement here. And you can see, let me put the everything filter back on so you can find it. The ruins of the Codrington's house is here. Highland House, which is built on one of the highest spots on the island, which you can see is not very high at all. Most coral islands don't have high spots anyway. You can see it's all overgrown and in ruins today. The Codringtons did not live in this house. They lived on, I believe, Antigua, St. Kitts, and over in the UK. They would come here for vacation, and I guess they were really into hunting, so they introduced wild deer to the island so that when they came for their vacations they could go hunting for deer. And there's still deer here today, running wild and free, along with wild horses and things from that time. Codringtons were not great people, I'll just say that. Apparently, Christopher Codrington, I think it was the guy who bought this island, or the son of him, I think it was the guy that bought this island, is probably a murderer, but that's a big question mark. That's an unsolved mystery for another day. But they owned many, many slaves on Antigua. And once they got Barbuda, they thought, perfect, we can house more slaves here to do kind of the busy work. And the kidnapped Africans that they brought to Barbuda did things like maintenance work for their sugar plantation windmills and just like kind of the behind the scenes things you'd need to run a plantation. Not necessarily, they're not out cutting the cane or anything like that. They're doing the back operations so that the Codringtons can live comfortably over in England. All the work can be done here. And of course, these slaves were not treated well at all. Antigua in particular was considered a very vicious slave community, I suppose, a very vicious slave-holding community. They did not treat these people very well at all. Which, I mean, of course, but it was particularly bad in Antigua. Bad here, not as bad, but still pretty bad. There were some slave revolts. There was a big one in 1741 called Beach's Rebellion. Nothing to do with the Beaches. The guy they were fighting against, his last name was Beach. There were some attacks. There were some assassinations from these people trying to get free. Of course. They're fighting for their rights as human beings. Eventually, though, Britain would outlaw slavery in 1834. And when they passed this law, they wrote up a big list of all the places that had slaves that were now free. They mentioned Antigua. They did not mention Barbuda, which the Codringtons thought, oh, cool, we can still own slaves on this island. And the slaves here were like, absolutely not. No way. And there was a lot of conflict due to that. And essentially, these people had to fight, protest, put up a big fight for their rights to be free. And eventually they were. But now there was an issue in that this island was privately owned by a family. And now there's hundreds of people here who are now free British citizens. Where are they supposed to go? So there was a kind of just verbal agreement at first that everyone owned this island and you can just plop down wherever you wanted as long as it didn't disagree with anyone, and everyone could just live communally. That became official, it became a law in 1904, but let me back up a little bit because this island was annexed by Antigua in 1859. The Codringtons didn't officially leave this island until 1870, which is why their house is in ruins. So this is, even today, the only island in the world that is communally owned. The people that live here are the owners of the island. And technically, we'll get into it, technically among the people here, there is no private property. Everyone owns everything together. And that became legal, super legal, in 2007 with the Barbuda Land Act, to ensure that politics in Antigua weren't messing around with the life here. But that was all to change in 2017. In 2017, Hurricane Irma blew through here and completely devastated the island, which was that one slideshow here on Princess Diana Beach. Let's find it. Where you could see just a little taste of what happened on this island. It was devastated. Basically, every building was damaged. Most were destroyed beyond repair. Thankfully, the island had been evacuated beforehand. There were very few people on the island when the hurricane hit. So people were safe, but everything that they had was gone. And then came the very complicated process of, well, how do you rebuild if everyone owns everything here? How do you claim that your property was destroyed when you technically don't have property? So the Antigua government came up with a scheme to buy parcels of land from people where their homes were for $1 and then sell it back to them so that they could have a claim on the land. But people, of course, hated this because they wanted to stay communal. So repairing the town, which they have since, it's all fixed now, thankfully, was a big issue, big political issue. And some not great people saw this as a business opportunity to snatch up some land. One of them was apparently Robert De Niro, the actor. You can see there's a Nobu over here, which I was like, that can't be a Nobu. That's like an elite Japanese steakhouse. There isn't a Nobu on this tiny island. Sure enough, there's a Nobu on this tiny island. And apparently, according to the reviews, it's one of the best Nobus out there. It's a very upscale, very expensive restaurant. So yeah, he got a Nobu in there. And the main issue is down here, near Princess Diana Beach. This whole section you can see here. Actually, where'd the label go? Barbuda Ocean Club, it says. So, other people were like, oh, hey, it's devastated, it's an empty island, let's snatch it up and build some resorts. So, some people actually managed to buy this parcel of land. So, now, sadly, there is now private property on Barbuda for the first time, I guess, ever. I guess the entire island was private property at one point, right? But there's now a section of the island that is private for the first time in its entire history. And you can see, even on here, it's not quite there yet. They're planning to build a huge resort down here. Which, you know, pro is that it's going to bring in so many jobs to the people here and bring in more tourists here. The con is that it kind of just ruins the entire way of life of the island, which is never a good thing. And it's giving colonialism, you know, things that people were trying to avoid all this time. COVID slowed down the building of this. It's still happening, apparently, but it is not open yet. So we'll have to see what happens down here. I do not know. I wanted to check out, I saw a slideshow over here I hadn't noticed before. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Put the everything filter back on. The easternmost point of Barbuda. Oh, there's no pictures. Bummer. That's why. Maybe I didn't check that out. Some pretty lagoons over here. Let's look at one more slideshow. I guess we could look at Codrington's slideshow. You can see there's there's no giant hotels here. I assume that there's little tiny ones, right? Most of the time, if you want to stay here, you're getting Airbnbs and rooms in people's houses. But that will probably change soon. Codrington does not have a slideshow. This is tomorrow's video. I had the same exact problem where the slideshows were just either nothing there or they were pictures of flowers and stuff. So tomorrow's video is going to be maps only, sadly. The Google Earth was not helping me out there. Let's look at, I think I saw another beach up here, right? There's a luxury beach here, Barbuda Belle. What is that? Oh, nice. Ooh, fancy sink. I like that. Oh, it's a nice little lodge you can stay and enjoy the beach. Oh, that would be me. Here in Washington, it's the end of September, so autumn is coming, and I'm a little sad that my summer seemed to fly by because I spent most of it packing and moving. And this makes me, oh, how beautiful. It's a gorgeous photo of this beautiful person. Looking at pictures like this makes me wish that summer maybe stuck around just a little bit longer. Oh, look at the crab legs. That's a whole crab. Another beautiful person. But I love Halloween and stuff like that, so I'm also excited for that to happen. But this makes me miss summer and swimming. So we're going to end the video here for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something new, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you learned down in the description box. Comments and thumbs up greatly help out my channel, and it's a free way to do so. So if you enjoy my channel in general, please don't forget that thumbs up and the comments. I love your comments. And if you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Ooh, interesting. Like I said, tomorrow's videos, we're not going to have a tablet, but I guess that makes up for this because this was only tablet, right? But we're going to be heading over to Azerbaijan and learn a little bit about some obscure history of a town in Azerbaijan. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. Look, there's a resort and spa here. Let's see what that is about. Stock photos. Is there really, though? Is it really? It's a boutique resort, so it's 4 rooms, right? Look at the wild horse there. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a